My parents left me to bleed out after an accident, all to celebrate my sister's achievements.
2 years later, they demanded that I sell my woodworking shop for $300,000 to fund her dreams. My decision to refuse left them utterly stunned.
Have you ever felt so desperate that you reached out to your only family member, only to be met with silence? Have you ever felt insignificant, no matter how hard you tried? I used to think that family was a safe haven until the day I nearly bled to death while my parents raised their glasses in honor of their golden child. Hello, I'm Ethan Hale, a 32-year-old carpenter specializing in handcrafted woodwork. 2 years ago today, a tragedy struck me that changed everything. That moment made me realize my place in my family. On that day, like any other, I was working in my small workshop in the heart of the Bitterroot Mountains, a place I had called home for many years. The shop was nestled deep in the woods, about 7 miles from my parents' house, close enough to call them if I needed help, but far enough that if something went wrong, I had to rely solely on myself. The rhythmic sound of the saw echoed through the shop, blending with the soft rustle of leaves outside and the gentle snores of my old dog, Max, who was basking in the sun on the porch. I had always loved this work, the way a rough, unshaped piece of wood could transform into something beautiful under my hands. It wasn't just a job, it was my passion, my life. But in a single moment, everything changed. The saw slipped, and blood gushed from my hand like a fountain, staining the wooden floor a deep crimson. I screamed, my body staggering as my left hand went numb, blood seeping through my fingers. There was no one there, just me and Max. Without thinking, I tore off my flannel shirt, ripping a piece with my teeth and wrapping it tightly around the wound. The fabric turned red almost instantly. I tightened it further, pain shooting up my arm, but I had no other choice. I had to stop the bleeding. I had to stay conscious. The workshop had always been my sanctuary, but now it felt like a prison, locking me inside with danger. My hand shook as I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, my blood-slicked fingers slipping as I dialed my parents' number. The phone rang, and I gritted my teeth, biting my lip to keep from crying out in pain. Mom, please come now. I had an accident.
The saw slipped and cut deep into my left hand. There's so much blood. My voice broke, hoarse and desperate, as soon as she picked up. The moment I told her what had happened, she responded in a light, almost indifferent tone, no urgency, no concern.
Don't worry, Ethan. Just wait a little bit. Then came the hollow sound of the call ending.
I closed my eyes, telling myself they would come, that they would help me stop the bleeding or at least get me to a hospital. But somewhere deep in my mind, a fear I always tried to ignore screamed louder, not the fear of the wound, but the fear of something even more painful. What if they never came? I gritted my teeth, leaning against the wall as a searing pain shot through my arm.
15 minutes had passed. My shop was only 7 miles from their house, less than a 10-minute drive. My vision blurred, and my head spun from blood loss. With trembling fingers, I redialed my mother's number, but no one answered. Then suddenly, my phone rang. It was my sister, Mia. I quickly picked up, thinking she had heard what happened and could help. But the moment I pressed the phone to my ear, her slurred, drawn-out voice hit me, heavy with the telltale signs of being drunk. Hey, Ethan. This party is amazing. I frowned, my breath shaky. Mia, silence. Then a lazy chuckle. Oh, hey. I meant to call someone else. Guess I dialed the wrong number. I narrowed my eyes. Wrong number? What are you even doing?
Mia laughed again, her voice filled with the exhilaration of someone who had drunk too much.
This party is incredible. Everyone is celebrating me. You know what Mom and Dad said? They've never been prouder of me than they are right now. Even Uncle Rick brought out the good champagne. Through the phone, I heard my mother's voice. Mia, raise your glass. I want a picture of you with Uncle Rick. Then my father's booming laughter, our girl finally made it a real star. I sat there, my entire body cold, but nothing felt colder than how they treated me. They hadn't come because they were too busy celebrating Mia. I was on the verge. Rusty's frantic barking pulled me from the haze, his voice ringing out like an alarm, urgent, desperate, as if he knew I was slipping past the edge of life and death.
Then the workshop door burst open, and a familiar voice called out, but it wasn't my father's or mother's.
Ethan! Oh my God, what happened to you?
It was June, my neighbor from a few houses down, storming in like a whirlwind. I forced my eyes open, seeing the shock widen in her expression as she took in the sight of me slumped against the wall, my arm wrapped in blood-soaked fabric. I tried to smile, but all that came out was a weak breath.
What are you doing here?
I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. June quickly crouched beside me, her jaw clenched as she inspected my arm.
Rusty has been barking nonstop for 20 minutes. I thought someone had broken into your shop, so I came to check.
Rusty was still growling, but when he saw me open my eyes, he whimpered and gently licked my hand. I felt his warmth, a small comfort against the biting pain. June wrapped another cloth tightly around my wound, so tight that I had to grit my teeth to keep from screaming. You've lost too much blood.
I'm taking you to the hospital now.
I gave a weak nod, and she pulled me to my feet, steady and sure, as if this wasn't the first time she had saved someone. Rusty stuck close to my legs, his body pressed against me as if he could shield me from whatever came next.
The workshop blurred behind us as June opened the truck door and helped me into the passenger seat.
Rusty leapt into the back, pressing his nose against my wrist, panting with worry. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to stay conscious as the truck sped down the uneven dirt road.
At the hospital, bright white lights made me squint.
The doctors spoke to the nurses before they began stitching up my wound. I felt every needle prick my skin, but it was nothing compared to the pain of betrayal. June sat beside me, her face still tight with concern.
When the doctor left, she leaned in and asked softly, "Are you okay? Do you want me to call your parents?" I let out a dry, hollow laugh. "Don't bother.
I called them when the accident happened."
They didn't come. They were too busy throwing a party for Mia. June blinked, as if struggling to believe what she had just heard. You nearly bled to death, and they stayed home? I didn't answer, I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. She leaned back, shaking her head, her expression a mix of disbelief and quiet fury. She said nothing else, but I knew exactly what she was thinking. I looked at June, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and bitterness. I had almost died, and the person who pulled me back from the brink wasn't my parents, it was a neighbor, a stranger bound to me by nothing but proximity, who cared more than the people who brought me into this world. The following day, after my wound had stabilized, the doctor pulled up a chair across from me. His voice was calm but serious. You're lucky, Ethan. The saw didn't hit a major artery.
He hesitated for a second, carefully choosing his words. The nerve has been damaged.
You might not be able to hold a hammer again.
I looked up, my heartbeat faltering.
Not be able to hold a hammer? My voice came out hoarse, almost unrecognizable. He nodded. We'll monitor it, but there's a chance your hand won't regain full dexterity. It'll take time to recover, if it even can. I stopped hearing anything after that.
The beeping of machines in the hospital room, the footsteps in the hallway, and even Rusty's soft breathing at my feet faded into the background.
Not being able to hold a hammer?
The workshop was everything I had, it was my life, the only thing I was good at.
If I couldn't hold a hammer, how was I supposed to live?
I looked down at my hand, wrapped in stark white bandages, trembling, useless. A part of my body, a part of who I was, had been stolen from me in a single moment of carelessness. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the crushing weight in my chest. If I wasn't a carpenter, then who was I? Suddenly, my phone buzzed, pulling me back into reality.
My other hand was still steady enough to pick it up. My father was calling. I blinked, steadying myself. Finally, he was calling.
Maybe, just maybe, he would ask if I was okay.
Perhaps he would say he was worried about me. I answered scoff, disbelief washing over me. You want me to sell my workshop, something I've poured my heart and soul into, to gamble on Leah's dream? I shook my head, feeling a mix of anger and incredulity. You think I'm just going to hand over everything I've built for a chance at something that might not even succeed?
My father's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing.
This isn't just about you, Jasper. This is about the family.
Leah has a chance to make something of herself, and we need to support her. You've always been so focused on your little shop, but this is a real opportunity. I felt my fists clench at my sides, the bandages on my left hand tightening as if echoing the tension in my chest.
You mean to say that you want me to sacrifice my livelihood for her? After everything that's happened? After you left me to bleed out while you celebrated her? You think I'm just going to forget that?
My mother stepped forward, her voice rising in desperation.
We raised you, Jasper. We did everything we could for you. You can't just cut us off like this. Leah needs us now more than ever.
I met her gaze, unwavering. You raised me to be a backup plan, a safety net for Leah.
You've always put her first, and I was just supposed to accept that? I'm not going to be your fallback anymore.
I'm done being the dutiful son who sacrifices everything for a family that doesn't care about me.
Silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My parents exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of confusion and anger. They had always expected me to comply, to fall in line, but I was done. I had found my strength in the aftermath of my accident, and I wasn't going to let them take that away from me.
Jasper, please, my father said, his voice softer now, almost pleading.
Think about this. If you sell the workshop, you could have a comfortable life. You wouldn't have to struggle anymore.
I shook my head, my resolve firm. I don't want a comfortable life built on the back of someone else's dreams. I want to create my own path, and that starts with this workshop.
I've worked too hard to let it go.
My mother's face fell, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. You're making a mistake, she said quietly, her voice trembling.
You could have everything you've ever wanted.
I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. What I want is to be respected, to be valued for who I am, not just as a means to an end. I'm not going to sell my workshop, and I'm not going to support Leah's dreams at the cost of my own. With that, I pointed to the door, my voice steady and final.
Get out. I won't be a part of this anymore.
They stood frozen for a moment, shock etched on their faces. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away, the door slamming shut behind them. I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness wash over me. They had always taken my tolerance for granted, and now they were faced with the reality that I was no longer willing to accept their treatment.
As the silence settled in the workshop, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift off my shoulders.
I had made my choice, and it felt liberating. I was no longer bound by their expectations or their demands. I had my workshop, my craft, and Rusty by my side.
That was enough. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my work. I carved with renewed passion, each stroke of the chisel a declaration of my independence.
I was no longer just a carpenter, I was an artist, reclaiming my identity piece by piece. Rusty stayed close, his presence a constant reminder that I wasn't alone. June continued to support me, bringing my carvings to the market and helping me connect with customers.
Each sale felt like a small victory, a testament to my resilience.
I was building something new, something that was entirely mine, and it felt incredible. As I worked, I often thought about my parents and the choices they had made. I realized that their absence had given me the space to grow, to discover who I truly was without their influence. I was no longer the shadow of Leah, I was Ethan, a carpenter with dreams of my own. One evening, as I sat in the workshop surrounded by the scent of fresh wood shavings, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I had faced my fears, confronted my past, and emerged stronger. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that I had the power to shape my own future. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped my lips. No, my mother frowned, her expression tightening.
Jasper, you're being short-sighted.
If you listen to us, your future will be completely different.
I met their gaze, my eyes cold. You want to invest in Leah? Fine.
Sell your house.
That's your property, you have the right to decide. But this workshop? This is my home. I'm not selling. My father's face darkened. Jasper, don't be selfish. The family needs you. You can't turn your back on Leah now.
Before I could respond, the door next to mine swung open. June stepped out, arms crossed, her eyes sharp. She had heard everything. "What a brilliant investment plan," she said, smiling coolly.
You want Jasper to sell the one thing he has to fund a business run by a girl who has never done anything but burn through family money? My father scowled. This isn't your business.
June shrugged. I wasn't planning to interfere, but when I hear someone being manipulated into giving up everything for someone else's pipe dream, I can't stay quiet.
She stepped forward, facing them head on. For years, what has Jasper done for you? He worked hard, he sends you money every month. Meanwhile, Leah did nothing but live off it.
And now that Jasper has stopped, instead of standing on your own, you come crawling back, trying to drain him even further to the point of taking his entire workshop. My mother's face flushed red.
That's not true. We want to help Leah.
Help or enable? June cut her off, her voice sharp.
What has Leah done to deserve $300,000? Or is she still just a spoiled woman-child who expects her parents to carry her for life? Silence filled the room.
My father had no response, and my mother lowered her gaze, unable to look me in the eye because they knew June was right. I crossed my arms, my voice calm but unwavering.
She's right. I'm not selling the workshop, and I suggest you go home before you lose that too. A long pause followed. Finally, my father clenched his fists and turned away.
My mother hesitated for a second before quietly following, not a single word left their mouths.
For the first time, they understood I would never go back.
June watched them leave before turning to me, narrowing her eyes.
Kid, don't let them come back a fourth time. I smirked. They won't get the chance. Rusty barked as if he agreed. After our last encounter, I thought they would finally abandon Leah's ridiculous project, but I was wrong. They didn't give up. Can't they make money the right way? Then borrow it? Can't they borrow it from me, then mortgage the house?
I didn't hear this from them, I heard it from June while I was tidying up the workshop that morning. She walked in and placed 2 cups of coffee on the table, her expression a mix of disapproval and concern.
Jasper, there's something you need to know. I raised an eyebrow. What is it?
She sighed, tapping her fingers lightly on the table as if choosing her words carefully. Then finally, she just said it outright, your parents mortgaged their house to invest in Leah.
I froze. What?
They signed the papers with the bank 3 weeks ago, she continued, her voice dropping. They took out a $300,000 loan, the exact amount they asked you for before, and Leah's project failed.
I let out a dry chuckle, shaking my head. Of course it failed.
It was never going to succeed, and they had never been willing to see the truth. I wasn't surprised, what interested me more was the price they had to pay.
I'm guessing the bank is taking the house, I said, my voice flat. June nodded. They've received a foreclosure notice. They'll have to leave if they don't pay the debt within 2 weeks. I nodded, as if it were just another ordinary piece of news. She studied me carefully. Jasper, are you going to help them? A simple question, but I had already made my decision a long time ago. I met her gaze, my voice calm but firm. No. She raised an eyebrow, maybe expecting that answer, but the finality in my tone still surprised her. I took a deep breath and set my coffee down. I know this answer might disappoint you because they're my parents, I said, never breaking eye contact. June stayed silent, listening. I clenched my left hand slightly, still feeling a dull ache despite it being healed. But the moment they left me to bleed out, I trailed off, squinting out the window, remembering that day when I was shaking.